The first time Ethan slept in our daughter Emma's room, I didn't think much of it. Emma was 8 years old. She'd always been sensitive. Thunderstorms frightened her. Bad dreams terrified her. When she woke up crying one night, Ethan carried a pillow into her room and stayed with her until morning. I remember smiling. I thought it was sweet. The kind of thing good fathers did, if only it had stopped there. Within a few weeks, it became routine. Every night around 10:30, Ethan would grab a blanket and disappear into Emma's room. Every morning, he'd emerge looking exhausted. Whenever I asked about it, he'd shrug. "She still has nightmares." At first, that answer made sense. Then it didn't, because Emma seemed perfectly fine during the day. Happy. Energetic, laughing, no signs of distress. Months passed. Then one evening I asked Emma directly, "Honey, are you still having bad dreams?" She looked confused. "What bad dreams?" I froze. "The ones Daddy helps you with." She shrugged. "I don't have bad dreams anymore." A chill ran through me. That night I confronted Ethan. He barely looked up from his phone. "She doesn't want to worry you." The answer came too quickly, too smoothly, like he'd practiced it. Something felt wrong, but I couldn't explain why. Suspicion rarely begins with one big event. It starts with small things, tiny cracks, tiny inconsistencies, tiny lies. I started noticing them everywhere. Emma would fall asleep by 9, yet Ethan wouldn't enter her room until after 10:30, sometimes 11, sometimes later. One night I woke up at 2 a.m. The hallway was dark. I walked toward Emma's room. The door was locked, from the inside. The next morning I asked Ethan about it. He laughed. "You're becoming paranoid." Maybe I was. I wanted to believe that. Then something happened that changed everything. Emma spent the weekend at her best friend's house. It was the first sleepover she'd ever attended. She was thrilled. I expected Ethan to sleep in our bed that night. After all, Emma wasn't home. There were no nightmares to comfort. No child to protect, no reason whatsoever. At 10:43 p.m., Ethan picked up his blanket and walked into Emma's empty room. My heart started pounding. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. 30. He never came back. That was the moment I stopped ignoring my instincts. The next day I bought a small camera. Nothing fancy, just enough to record. I hated myself for doing it. Part of me hoped I'd find an innocent explanation. Maybe he liked the mattress. Maybe he used the room to work. Maybe there was something simple I was missing. That night I installed the camera, hidden on a bookshelf, pointed toward the bed. Then I waited. At 10:41 p.m., Ethan entered the room, exactly as expected. The next morning, after he left for work, I sat down and opened the footage. I expected answers. I wasn't prepared for the truth. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Ethan sat on the bed, quietly, motionless, staring at the wall. Then he reached under the mattress and pulled out a box, a small metal lockbox. My stomach tightened. He opened it. Removed papers, photographs, documents, a flash drive. And then he began crying, not quietly, not subtly. He broke down completely. I stared at the screen, confused. This wasn't what I'd expected, not even close. For nearly an hour, he sat there looking through photographs, reading documents, wiping away tears. Then he locked everything back inside the box, returned it beneath the mattress, and went to sleep. I watched the footage 3 times, still confused, still suspicious, but now for entirely different reasons. What was in that box? And why was it hidden in our daughter's room? The moment Ethan left for work, I lifted the mattress. The box was exactly where the video showed. Inside were dozens of photographs, old photographs, many I'd never seen before. Then I noticed the dates. Most were from before I met him. One photograph showed Ethan standing beside a young woman. Beautiful, smiling, pregnant. Written on the back, "Emily 2013, my hands began shaking. Who was Emily? Then I found the hospital records, birth certificates, medical reports. letters. And suddenly everything made sense. Emily wasn't a girlfriend. She was Ethan's first wife. And the little girl in the photographs, her name was Emma, our Emma. When Ethan came home that evening, I was waiting. The box sat on the kitchen table. His face immediately went pale. "You found it." It wasn't a question. I nodded. Then he told me a story I'd never heard before. Before me, before our marriage, before our life together. There had been Emily, his high school sweetheart. His first love. The woman he'd planned to spend forever with. They had a daughter together, Emma. When Emma was 4 years old, Emily died from an aggressive illness. Very suddenly, very painfully. According to Ethan, he never recovered, not completely. Years later, when we met, he couldn't bring himself to tell me. Not because he wanted to deceive me, because he was ashamed of how broken he still felt. I sat in silence, trying to process everything. Then I asked the obvious question. Why our daughter's room? The answer broke my heart. Our daughter wasn't named Emma by accident. When I became pregnant years earlier, Ethan suggested the name. I loved it immediately, never knowing its significance. He never told me. Every night he entered her room because seeing our daughter reminded him of the child he'd lost. Not physically, emotionally. The daughter who never got to grow up, the wife who never got to watch it happen, the life that vanished overnight. For years he'd hidden his grief, buried it, ignored it, pretended it no longer existed. But grief doesn't disappear, it waits, and eventually it finds a way out. He wasn't sleeping there because of our daughter. He was sleeping there because of his past. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. Because hidden inside the box was one final document, a letter addressed to me, written years earlier, never sent. I opened it. In that letter, Ethan confessed everything. The first wife, the first child, the guilt, the grief, the fear, and one sentence I'll never forget. "I'm terrified that if she knows the truth, she'll realize she's living with a man who never fully healed." I cried reading it, because for the first time I understood. This wasn't betrayal, it was grief. And grief had been quietly destroying our marriage. The next day I arranged therapy, not just for Ethan, for both of us. The conversations were difficult, painful, uncomfortable, but they were honest, for the first time in years. Slowly things changed. The nightly visits stopped, the secrets stopped, the silence stopped, most importantly. The healing started. Ending a year later, Ethan and I visited Emily's grave together for the first time. We brought flowers and our daughter. As we walked back toward the car, Emma looked up and asked, "Daddy, are you sad?" He smiled softly. "A little. Why?" He squeezed my hand, then hers, and said, "Because sometimes you miss people forever." That night, for the first time in nearly a decade, Ethan slept beside me, not because he had forgotten the past, but because he had finally stopped hiding from it. And all of it began the night I hid a camera in my daughter's room, expecting to catch a lie, and instead discovered a heartbreak that had been waiting years to be told.